The text message glowed on my phone screen. "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now, haha." I stared at it, unable to breathe. The house my grandfather built, where I had lived all 30 years of my life, where I had replaced every pipe and repaired every crack, was suddenly not mine anymore. My own mother had locked me out while I was at work. What she forgot was that Grandpa had left me more than just memories. He left me legal rights she never bothered to understand. The house on Maple Street had always been my home. My grandfather Walter built it with his own hands in the 1970s, laying each brick and hammering every nail with careful precision. The two-story colonial with the wide front porch wasn't just a structure to him. It was his legacy, his masterpiece. I spent my childhood following him around that house like a shadow. While other kids played video games, I was learning how to replace a washer in a leaky faucet or patch a hole in drywall. "Diamond, hand me that wrench," he'd say, and I'd beam with pride at being his helper. By the time I was 12, I could name every tool in his workshop and knew exactly where each one belonged. My father left when I was 10, just packed his bags one Tuesday morning, and walked out without looking back. Mom, Jessica, fell apart. She couldn't pay the mortgage on our small rental, couldn't seem to hold down a job through her depression. That's when Grandpa Walter stepped in. "You and the boy come live with me," he told her. "This house is too big for just one old man anyway." We moved in that summer, and everything changed. While Mom slowly pieced her life back together, taking a job as an office manager at a local insurance company, I became Grandpa's apprentice. Every weekend and summer break, we worked on the house together. New kitchen cabinets when I was 14, bathroom remodels when I was 16, a wraparound deck when I was 18. "This house will be yours someday," he'd tell me as we worked. "Someone who knows its bones should take care of it." I believed him. Even when I started working full-time at Jackson Construction after high school, instead of going to college, I lived at home. Not because I couldn't afford to move out, but because there was always another project waiting. New windows one year, redoing the basement the next. Mom was happy to have me there, especially after Grandpa's health began to decline. The cancer took him slowly, then all at once. 6 months ago, he slipped away in his sleep, and the house felt emptier than I thought possible. Mom and I grieved together, finding comfort in our shared memories of him. 2 months later, she brought home Frank. "Diamond, this is Frank Thompson. We've been seeing each other," she announced one evening, bringing home a tall, broad-shouldered man with a square jaw and expensive watch. Frank had a firm handshake and a corporate smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. A week later, she told me they were getting married. 2 weeks after that, Frank and his 16-year-old son Travis moved in. "This is going to be great," Mom said, squeezing my arm. "A fresh start for all of us." I wanted to believe her. I really did. I welcomed them, helped Frank move their furniture in, showed Travis around the neighborhood. When Frank mentioned they were having financial struggles, I even offered to contribute more to the household expenses. "Let me show you how the furnace works," I told Frank one evening. "It's got some quirks, but I've got it running smooth." "Sure thing, buddy," he replied, but I could tell he wasn't really listening. Still, we had a few good family dinners. Travis was sullen but occasionally cracked a smile at my jokes. For a brief moment, it felt like maybe this new arrangement could work. Then one afternoon, while searching for a specific drill bit in Grandpa's workshop, I found a letter tucked inside one of his old project notebooks. It was addressed to me, dated just a year before he died. "Diamond," it read. "I've spoken with my attorney about making sure you're taken care of. You'll have half ownership of the house when I'm gone. You've put as much work into it as I have at this point. It's only right." That night at dinner, I casually mentioned the letter. "Oh, that." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Dad changed his mind later. That was just a draft he never got around to throwing away." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I nodded and let it go. This was my mother, after all. The woman who had read me bedtime stories and nursed me through chickenpox. If there was anyone in this world I should be able to trust, it was her. But as I lay in bed that night, Grandpa's words echoed in my head. This house will be yours someday. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Still, I chose trust over conflict. That was my first mistake. The changes started small, almost imperceptible. Frank moved some of Grandpa's old tools from the workshop to make room for his exercise equipment. Reasonable enough, I thought. The workshop was cluttered. But then my tools started migrating to the garage, which was unheated and prone to dampness. When I mentioned this to Mom, she sighed. Diamond, Frank needs his space too. You have to be willing to compromise. Then came the redecorating. The comfortable plaid couch where Grandpa and I had watched countless baseball games disappeared, replaced by a sleek leather sectional. The family photos in the hallway came down, making way for abstract art pieces that Mom would never have chosen on her own. We're updating the space, she explained when I asked. Frank thinks it's time for a more modern look. I offered to pay rent to secure my position in the house. $500 a month, which Mom accepted readily enough. But it didn't stop Frank from commenting about my continued presence. Most guys your age have their own place by now, he'd say casually over dinner. When I was 30, I already owned my first condo. Travis was less subtle. He took to calling me the roommate, and would blast music outside my bedroom door when I was trying to sleep after working a 12-hour shift. Then came the house rules. Frank posted them on the refrigerator one Sunday morning. Common areas to be vacated by 10 p.m. on weeknights. Kitchen use scheduled by sign-up sheet. Workshop access by permission only. It was my grandfather's workshop, the place where he'd taught me everything I knew about woodworking and home repair. And now, I needed permission to enter it. Mom grew increasingly distant. The woman who had once sought my opinion on everything from car repairs to her outfit choices now barely made eye contact at breakfast. You know, Diamond, she said one morning, stirring her coffee absently, most men your age have moved on from their childhood homes, started their own families. I'm saving for my own place, I lied, not wanting to admit that I'd always assumed I'd inherit the house I'd helped maintain for 20 years. The housing market's tough right now. While they were reshaping the house in their image, I continued doing what I'd always done. Fixed the leaking dishwasher when it flooded the kitchen. Replaced the bathroom fan when it started making that grinding noise. Patched the roof after a windstorm. I kept every receipt, documented every repair in the maintenance log Grandpa had started decades ago. Frank and Mom started entertaining frequently, cocktail parties with his colleagues from the investment firm where he worked. I was never invited to join, instead overhearing the laughter and conversation from my bedroom while trying to sleep before early morning shifts. We're thinking of converting the extra bedroom into Frank's home office, Mom mentioned casually one morning. My bedroom was the only extra room in the house. When I tried to discuss boundaries, Frank interrupted. Look, Diamond, I get that change is hard, but you're going to have to adapt. This is our home now too. Our home. As if his 2 months of residence compared to my 30 years. Then came the discovery that changed everything. I was printing out work documents when I noticed a stack of papers in the printer tray. I wouldn't normally have looked, but the header caught my eye. Residential listing agreement. As I scanned the document, my stomach dropped. The house. My grandfather's house. My home. Listed for sale at $420,000, well below market value for the neighborhood. Open house scheduled for next weekend. They were selling the house out from under me, without so much as a conversation, and at a price that didn't come close to reflecting the improvements and maintenance I'd put into it over the years. I sat at the kitchen table that night, hands trembling as I waited for Mom and Frank to return from their dinner out. The listing agreement sat in front of me, like a bomb waiting to detonate. Were you going through our papers? Frank demanded when they finally returned. His face had turned an alarming shade of red as he snatched the listing agreement from the table. It was in the printer, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Were you going to tell me you're selling the house? My home? Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Diamond, we've been thinking about downsizing, getting a condo closer to Frank's office. Downsizing? This is the house Grandpa built. The house he wanted me to have. Frank snorted. You don't own this house, kid. Your mother does. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Grandpa told me many times that he wanted me to have half ownership. I found a letter where he mentioned speaking to his attorney about it. A letter isn't a legal document, Frank shot back. And from what Jessica tells me, you've been living here rent-free most of your adult life. I've been maintaining this house for 20 years, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts. Every major repair, every renovation. I've put thousands of hours and dollars into this place. Sweat equity isn't real equity, Frank said dismissively. It's time you grew up and got your own place like a normal adult. Mom finally spoke up. Diamond, my father left Emmy this house. It's my name on the deed. I've let you stay because you're my son, and I love you. But Frank and I need to make decisions that are best for our future. I want to see the will, I said quietly. I want to see exactly what Grandpa left, and to whom. Mom's face hardened. That's private family business. I am family. You're acting like an entitled child, Frank interjected. Your mother doesn't owe you this house or anything else. I'm going to talk to an attorney, I said, standing up from the table. I have rights here. Frank stepped toward me, his face inches from mine. You listen to me, he growled. Your mother has been carrying you for years. It's time you showed some respect and gratitude instead of threatening legal action. Who do you think you are? I stepped back, unwilling to escalate to physical confrontation. I'm the guy who's kept this house standing for the past 2 decades, I replied. And I'm not going to let you sell it out from under me without a fight. I packed a bag that night, planning to take a weekend camping trip to the state park about 2 hours away. I needed space to think, to plan my next move without Frank breathing down my neck. As I drove to the campground, thoughts swirled through my mind. Was I being unreasonable? Had Grandpa really intended for me to have part ownership? Or was that just something he'd said to make me feel valued? Should I just accept that at 30, it was past time for me to move on? But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. This wasn't just about a house. It was about promises made and kept. It was about 20 years of blood, sweat, and calloused hands. It was about honoring my grandfather's wishes and protecting his legacy. By Sunday afternoon, I had made my decision. I would stand firm on my rights, whatever they might be. I would consult an attorney and get clarity on my legal position. Then I would approach Mom again, calmly and rationally, hoping we could reach some kind of understanding. I pulled into our driveway around 8 p.m. Sunday night, feeling oddly nervous about entering my own home. That nervousness turned to confusion when my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I tried the back door, then the side entrance to the garage. Nothing. As I stood on the porch, bewildered, my phone chimed. A text message from Mom. We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now, haha. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My own mother had locked me out of my home of 30 years, the home I had helped maintain and improve for most of my life, and she was mocking me for it. Everything okay there, Diamond? Tom, our neighbor of 20 years, called from his driveway. He was walking his golden retriever, eyeing me with concern. They changed the locks, I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. While you were gone. That's not right. Tom frowned. Look, our guest room's made up if you need a place tonight. Thanks, Tom. I might take you up on that. As Tom headed back to his house, I noticed the garage door was unlocked. Inside, I found several garbage bags containing my clothes, books, and personal items. They'd packed up my life in my absence, erasing any trace of me from the house. Something about seeing my possessions stuffed into trash bags broke through my shock. Anger surged through me, hot and clarifying. I began systematically going through the garage, looking for anything else they might have discarded. In the back corner, behind a stack of old paint cans, I found a loose brick in the wall. Grandpa had shown me the hiding spot years ago, saying it was where he kept important things away from prying eyes. I'd forgotten about it until that moment. Behind the brick was a metal lockbox, My hands trembled as I pulled it out and entered the combination, my birth, month, and year. Inside was a folder of legal documents, yellowed with age but preserved in plastic sleeves. On top was a deed to the house, dated 3 years ago. It listed 2 owners, Jessica Marshall and Diamond Marshall. A 50-50 split. Beneath it was Grandpa's will, notarized and official, confirming the same arrangement. And at the bottom of the box, a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. I opened it with care, unfolding a letter dated just weeks before he passed. Diamond, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and something has happened to make you look for proof of what's yours. I hope it never comes to that, but I've lived long enough to know how people can change when money and property are involved. I've left you half ownership of the house because you've earned it. Every weekend you could have been out with friends. You were here with me, fixing, building, improving. This house is as much yours as it is anyone's. I didn't tell you directly because I didn't want to create conflict between you and your mother while I was still around to witness it. That was cowardly of me, and I'm sorry. Jessica has always been financially irresponsible, and I feared she might try to sell if she needed money. Your co-ownership protects both of you. Stand firm, grandson. What's right isn't always what's easy. Love, Grandpa Walter. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the garage, letter in hand, tears streaming down my face. Grief for my grandfather mixed with betrayal from my mother and steely determination for what I knew I had to do next. I carefully replaced everything in the lockbox except the deed and will copies I would need. Then I went to Tom's house to accept his offer of shelter for the night. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. You can stay as long as you need, Patrick said, helping me carry my bags into his apartment. Patrick and I had been friends since high school, when we both worked summer jobs at the local hardware store. Guest room's yours. It's not fancy, but it's better than a motel. I appreciate it, man. Should only be a few days while I figure things out. I set down the garbage bags containing my hastily packed life and sank onto his couch. Patrick's cousin Tyler came over the next evening. He worked as a real estate agent and had brought pizza and legal insights. So you have a deed showing you own 50%, Tyler said, examining the documents I'd spread across Patrick's kitchen table. That's huge, Diamond. They can't sell without your signature, for starters. What are my options? I asked. Several routes, Tyler said between bites of pepperoni pizza. You could force a partition action, which basically means the court would divide the property or force a sale with proceeds split according to ownership. Or you could negotiate a buyout, either you buying her share or vice versa. I don't want to lose the house, I said firmly. Grandpa built it. It means everything to me. Then you need a good lawyer, like yesterday, Tyler advised. Family property disputes get ugly fast. The next morning, I called in a personal day at work and began researching attorneys specializing in property disputes. I interviewed 3 before finding Amanda Prescott, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with 20 years of experience in family property law. Walk me through everything, she said during our first meeting in her downtown office. Don't leave out any details. For 2 hours, I laid out the whole story, from Grandpa's promises to the home improvements I'd made, the appearance of Frank, the lockout, and finally, the discovery of the deed and will. You have a strong case for enforcing your ownership rights, Amanda said when I'd finished. The deed clearly establishes you as a 50% owner. Your mother cannot sell the property without your consent, nor can she legally lock you out of a home you co-own. What's our strategy? I asked. First, we document everything. Every improvement you've made, every dollar you've spent. Create a complete paper trail of your investment in that house. Then, we send formal legal notices asserting your ownership rights and demanding immediate access to your property. And if they refuse? Amanda's smile was thin but confident. Then we escalate to court action. But let's start with the notices and see how they respond. Over the next week, I gathered everything I could find. 20 years of receipts for materials, photographic evidence of improvements, testimonials from neighbors who had witnessed my constant work on the house. I even had the maintenance log Grandpa and I had kept, detailing every repair from 1998 onward. Amanda prepared formal legal notices, asserting my 50% ownership and demanding immediate restoration of my access to the property. The documents were delivered by certified mail, requiring signature confirmation. "Now we wait," she said, but not for long. 3 days later, Amanda called me at work, her voice tense. "Diamond, I've just discovered something through the property records. The house is already under contract for sale. Closing is scheduled 2 weeks from now." My stomach dropped. "They're trying to sell it out from under me, even though I'm on the deed?" "It appears so. And there's more. The sale price is $420,000. Based on recent comps in your neighborhood, that property should be going for at least $550,000, possibly more given the improvements you've described." "They're practically giving it away," I said, the implications sinking in. "Why would they sell so far below market value?" "That's something we need to find out. In the meantime, I'm filing an emergency injunction to halt the sale. I need you to come to my office right away to sign the paperwork." By that evening, Amanda had filed the emergency petition with the county court. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning. "Be prepared," Amanda warned me. "This will be your first face-to-face confrontation with your mother and Frank since the lockout. Stay calm. Let me do the talking, and don't rise to any provocations." I barely slept that night, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say to Mom. The betrayal cut deep, beyond the practical matter of the house itself. How could she throw away 30 years of family history? How could she toss me aside so easily for a man she'd known less than 6 months? The next morning, dressed in my only suit, I met Amanda at the courthouse steps. We were reviewing our documentation one last time when I saw them arrive. Mom, looking small and tense in a blue dress I didn't recognize. Frank, his arm around her shoulders, whispering in her ear. And behind them, a balding man in an expensive suit who I assumed was their attorney. Our eyes met across the courthouse lobby. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in my mother's gaze. Guilt? Regret? But then Frank whispered something else to her, and her face hardened. "Diamond," Amanda said quietly, placing a hand on my arm. "Remember what we discussed. Stay calm." The emergency hearing lasted just 45 minutes. Amanda presented the deed showing my 50% ownership, along with evidence of my continuous residence and maintenance of the property. She argued persuasively that the pending sale was being conducted without my knowledge or consent, potentially constituting fraud. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened carefully to both sides before making her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting a temporary injunction, halting the sale of the property at 824 Maple Street until ownership rights can be fully established. Furthermore, as Mr. Duct, Marshall appears to be a legal co-owner. He is entitled to access his property immediately. The locks must be restored to their prior state, or new keys provided to Mr. Marshall by 5 p.m. today. Outside the courtroom, their attorney approached Amanda. "My clients would like to request a settlement conference," he said stiffly. "Perhaps we can resolve this matter without further court involvement." "We're amenable to discussion," Amanda replied. "Have your office call mine to schedule." As they turned to leave, Mom paused, looking back at me with red-rimmed eyes. "How could you do this to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your own mother?" Before I could respond, Frank pulled her away, and they disappeared down the courthouse steps. "That went as well as could be expected," Amanda said as we walked to her car. "Now we prepare for the settlement conference." 2 days later, we met in a conference room at Amanda's law firm. The atmosphere was tense, with Mom refusing to look at me directly. "Let's get straight to the point," their attorney began. "My clients dispute the validity of the deed Mr. Marshall has presented. They contend that Walter Marshall was not of sound mind when it was created." "That's absurd," Amanda countered. "The deed was created 3 years before Mr. Marshall's death, well before any health issues arose. It was properly notarized and recorded with the county. Furthermore, We have the executed will confirming the same arrangement, plus a handwritten letter explaining his intentions. Letters can be forged, Frank interjected, earning a warning glance from his attorney. We're prepared to litigate this matter fully, their lawyer continued smoothly. Property disputes can take years to resolve, during which time the asset remains frozen. Perhaps Mr. Pactus Claus Conte. Marshall would consider accepting a cash settlement instead? Say, $50,000 to relinquish any claim to the property? Amanda smiled thinly. My client's 50% share of the property's fair market value would be approximately $275,000 at minimum. $50,000 isn't even in the ballpark. The negotiations continued for 2 hours, growing increasingly heated. Mom accused me of ingratitude and betrayal. Frank threatened countersuits for everything from defamation to emotional distress. I remained silent through most of it, letting Amanda handle the legal aspects while I tried to understand how we'd reached this point. We left without resolution, and Amanda warned me the process could become lengthy and even more contentious. The court will likely appoint a neutral appraiser to determine fair market value, she explained. In the meantime, you have every right to return to your home. I'm not sure I want to live under the same roof with them now, I admitted. That's understandable. But don't surrender your rights. Even if you choose to stay elsewhere temporarily, maintain access to the property and document everything. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was my younger sister, Amber, sobbing so hard I could barely make out her words. How could you? She finally managed. Mom says you're trying to steal her house and make her homeless. She says you've threatened her and Frank, that they don't feel safe. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. Mom wasn't just fighting me for the house. She was turning our entire family against me with a false narrative. Amber, that's not true. I'm just trying to protect what's legally mine. Grandpa left me half the house. I have the deed and his will to prove it. Mom says you forged those documents, she shot back. She says you've been planning this for years, that you're just greedy and don't want to grow up and get your own place. I tried to explain the truth, but Amber wasn't ready to hear it. By the time we hung up, I knew I was facing more than just a legal battle. This was becoming a full-blown family fracture, with sides being chosen and relationships potentially damaged beyond repair. The worst part was wondering if any of them would ever know or believe the truth. The email arrived at 6:32 the next morning. We have a problem. Call immediately. It was from Richard Grayson, the attorney representing Mom and Frank. Amanda advised me not to respond directly. All communication should go through proper legal channels now, she said when I forwarded her the email. They're probably panicking because the buyer is threatening to walk away after learning about the ownership dispute. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing to address the ownership claims. Amanda spent hours preparing me for my testimony, emphasizing the need to stick to facts rather than emotions. The judge doesn't care about hurt feelings, she explained. They care about legal documents, financial contributions, and established patterns of behavior. When the day of the hearing arrived, the courtroom felt impossibly small. Mom sat just 15 feet away, but the emotional distance between us spanned miles. Frank kept trying to stare me down, as if he could intimidate me into backing off my claim. Mom was first to testify. She claimed Grandpa had mentioned giving me partial ownership, but had changed his mind in his final months. She said the deed must have been executed during a period of confusion or undue influence. My father would never have split the house, she insisted, tears in her eyes. He knew I needed security after my divorce. Diamond is just being selfish, refusing to move on with his life like a normal adult. When my turn came, I presented the facts as clearly as I could. The years of maintenance and improvements, the conversations with Grandpa about my future ownership, the discovery of the lockbox with the deed, will, and letter. Your Honor, I concluded, I'm not trying to take anything from my mother. I'm simply trying to protect what my grandfather legally left to me. Half of the home I've helped maintain for 20 years. The judge asked several pointed questions about the timeline of events, particularly focusing on why I hadn't asserted my ownership rights immediately after Grandpa's death. I didn't know I needed to, I explained honestly. I trusted my mother to honor Grandpa's wishes. It wasn't until I discovered they were trying to sell the house without my knowledge that I realized I needed legal protection. After hearing both sides, the judge granted a continuation of the injunction preventing the sale and ordered a full trial to determine the validity of the competing ownership claims. In the meantime, I was legally entitled to access and reside in the property. "This is just round one," Amanda cautioned as we left the courthouse. The full trial could be months away. When I returned to the house that evening, escorted by a sheriff's deputy to ensure my access, I found the atmosphere unbearably tense. Mom and Frank had moved my belongings into the smallest bedroom, formerly used for storage. My old room had already been converted into Frank's home office. I kept to myself, using the kitchen only when they were out, avoiding common areas when they were home. It was a miserable existence, living as a stranger in the house I'd helped maintain for decades. After a particularly uncomfortable encounter with Frank in the hallway, where he accidentally bumped into me hard enough to send me into the wall, I decided to reach out to my siblings individually. Maybe if they understood my side, they could help broker peace. My older brother Brian agreed to meet me for coffee the following Saturday. He listened carefully as I laid out the whole story, showing him copies of the documents I'd found. "I believe you," he said finally. "This fits the pattern. Mom's always been impulsive, especially with money, and especially with new relationships. Why would she do this, Brian? I'm her son. I've always been there for her." He sighed, running a hand through hair that was thinning in the same pattern as our father's. "My guess? Frank. He saw an opportunity to cash in on an asset and convinced her it was a good idea. Mom's always been easily influenced by the men in her life. Amber was a different story. She refused to meet in person, but agreed to a phone call. She remained convinced that I was the villain in this scenario, trying to steal Mom's security out of selfishness. "Grandpa would be so disappointed in you," were her parting words before hanging up. The stress began affecting other areas of my life. My boss at the construction company noticed my distraction and declining performance. After I nearly caused an accident with a forklift, he called me into his office. "Take some personal time, Diamond," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Whatever's going on, you need to get your head straight before someone gets hurt." I applied for a leave of absence, which was granted with reluctance. One more casualty of this conflict, I thought as I drove home. My work reputation, something I'd built carefully over years of dedicated service. The legal proceedings grew increasingly complex. Mom and Frank's attorneys filed motions claiming adverse possession and disputed inheritance. Amanda countered with evidence, including the testimony of Grandpa's attorney, who confirmed the legitimacy of both the deed and his intentions. He was very clear. Maxwell Porter testified at a deposition. Walter wanted his grandson to have half ownership as recognition of the years of work he'd put into maintaining the property. He also expressed concern about his daughter's financial judgment and wanted to ensure the property couldn't be sold without mutual agreement. Court-ordered mediation was scheduled, then derailed when Mom stormed out halfway through, claiming I was being unreasonable for not accepting their increased offer of $75,000. As the weeks dragged on, I found myself questioning whether the fight was worth the cost. Not the financial cost, though Amanda's fees were mounting, but the emotional toll. The family I'd known was splintering before my eyes, possibly beyond repair. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. During the discovery process, where both sides were required to share relevant financial information, Amanda uncovered something shocking. Mom and Frank had taken out a second mortgage on the house just 3 months after Grandpa's death, borrowing $150,000 against the equity. "Where did that money go?" I asked, staring at the loan documents. "They've only lived together a few months. No major purchases or renovations that I can see." Amanda dug deeper, following a paper trail that revealed a pattern of large cash withdrawals, casino visits, and mounting credit card debt in my mother's name. "Diamond," Amanda said gently during a private meeting in her office. "Based on these financial records, it appears your mother may have a gambling problem. These patterns of spending, the quick cash outs, the timing of withdrawals that correspond with visits to the Golden Eagle Casino. It's a classic pattern. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Mom, a gambling addict? It seemed impossible, yet as I thought back over the years, small incidents began to make sense. The time she'd been mysteriously short on rent money despite her steady job. The girls' weekends that left her exhausted and irritable. Her resistance to sharing financial information with me, even when I was contributing to household expenses. The sale of the house, I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. They need quick cash. Below market value, all cash offer, fast closing. Amanda nodded grimly. My guess is there are creditors applying pressure. Possibly dangerous ones, depending on how deep she's in. What does this mean for our case? Legally, it strengthens our position. If the judge sees evidence that they're attempting to liquidate an asset to pay gambling debts, particularly without the knowledge of a co-owner, it will not reflect well on them. But Diamond, she paused, her expression softening. This also changes the human equation. Your mother may need help beyond what a court can provide. I left Amanda's office with my mind reeling. All this time, I'd been fighting for my rights to the house, feeling betrayed and discarded by my mother. Now I had to consider that her actions might be driven by addiction rather than simple callousness or greed. That night, as I lay awake in what had once been a storage room in my own home, I faced a difficult truth. Winning the legal battle wouldn't heal my family. In fact, it might drive the final wedge between us. Yet I couldn't simply walk away from my inheritance, from the home Grandpa had intended me to have. There had to be another way forward, one that honored both my rights and the family bonds that were stretching to the breaking point. The answer came to me just before dawn, a solution that felt right in both my heart and mind. I called Amanda as soon as her office opened. I want to make them an offer, I said, but not the one they're expecting. The next phase of the legal battle took an unexpected turn. After my conversation with Amanda, we developed a new strategy, one that acknowledged both the legal realities and the human complexities of the situation. I want to buy out Mom's half of the house, I explained to Amanda. I've got some savings, and I should be able to qualify for a mortgage for the rest. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. It's a solid approach. You'd be offering a lifeline while still protecting your interests. We'll need to have the property properly appraised to determine fair market value. The court appointed a neutral appraiser who valued the house at $560,000, confirming Amanda's earlier estimate. My 50% was already worth $280,000, so I would need to secure financing for the remaining amount to buy out Mom's share. While Amanda prepared the buyout offer, I reached out to my older brother Brian again. I think Mom has a gambling problem, I told him over coffee, at a diner far from our neighborhood, where we wouldn't risk running into family or neighbors. Brian's face fell. I was afraid of that. Dad used to complain about her casino trips before they split. I noticed she always seems to have money trouble despite her decent job, but I never wanted to pry. The house sale is about paying off debts, I explained. They need cash fast, which is why they're accepting such a low offer. I'm going to try to buy out her half instead. That's generous of you, considering everything, Brian said. Do you need help with the down payment? I could contribute something. His offer touched me deeply. I've got it covered, but thanks. What I really need is your help reaching out to Amber and the rest of the family. Mom's been spreading a narrative that I'm trying to make her homeless. I need someone else to explain what's really happening. Brian agreed to help, and over the next week, he spoke with our sister and several extended family members, explaining the true situation. It didn't immediately repair all the damage, but at least some family members began to question Mom's version of events. Meanwhile, the threatening calls from Mom's friends and distant relatives tapered off as the truth began to circulate. Not everyone believed it, but enough doubt had been cast on the Diamond is stealing Mom's house narrative that I no longer felt completely isolated. The stress continued to affect my work life. Even on leave, I received calls from my boss asking when I might return. The company was holding my position, but they couldn't do so indefinitely. Construction season was in full swing, and they needed all hands on deck. Just a few more weeks, I promised, hoping it was true. Amanda submitted our formal buyout offer to Mom and Frank's attorney, $280,000 for Jessica's 50% stake in the property. A fair price, based on the court-appointed appraiser's valuation. The response came swiftly. Rejected. They counter-offered at $350,000, well above market value. They're desperate for cash, Amanda observed, but not desperate enough to be reasonable. We were preparing for the next round of court hearings when Amanda received a call from their attorney requesting an urgent meeting. Something had shifted. It's about the mortgage situation, Richard Grayson explained, when we convened in Amanda's conference room the next morning. Frank was present, but notably, Mom was not. My clients are facing some financial pressures that have complicated this matter, Grayson continued, choosing his words carefully. There are concerns about the second mortgage that was taken out on the property. Concerns such as? Amanda prompted. Frank shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Jessica has some issues with money management, he said finally. The loan was taken out to consolidate some debts, but the situation has evolved. You mean her gambling debts have mounted? Amanda said bluntly. Frank's head snapped up. How did you know about that? Financial discovery works both ways, Mr. Thompson. We've traced the money flow from that second mortgage. Very little went to debt consolidation. Most went directly to casinos or was withdrawn in cash at ATMs inside gaming establishments. Frank deflated visibly. I didn't know how bad it was when we got married, he admitted. I thought I could help her get it under control. Then I found out about the loan sharks. Loan sharks? I repeated, stomach sinking. She borrowed from some people you don't want to owe money to, Frank said quietly. That's why we need to sell, quickly. They're not patient creditors. The meeting ended with a new understanding but no resolution. Frank promised to discuss our buyout offer again with Jessica and their attorney, with a more realistic understanding of their limited options. As I drove home, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. The truth was finally emerging, but it was far more tragic than I'd imagined. My mother wasn't just being callous or greedy. She was trapped in addiction and dangerous debt, possibly putting herself and others at risk. I was unlocking the door to the house when my phone rang. It was Amber. Is it true? She demanded without preamble. About Mom's gambling? Yes, I said simply. I have the financial records from the court discovery process. Why didn't you just tell me from the beginning? Her voice cracked with emotion. Would you have believed me? You were pretty convinced I was the villain in this story. She was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Maybe not. She's our mom, Diamond. We're supposed to be able to trust her. I know, Amber. That's what made this so hard. What are you going to do now? If you take the house, where will she go? I'm not taking anything that isn't legally mine, I said firmly. And I'm trying to buy out her half at a fair price, which would give her enough money to start fresh somewhere else if that's what she wants. Do you think she'll get help? For the gambling, I mean. I don't know. That has to be her choice. But I'm not going to enable her by letting her sell the house out from under me to pay off loan sharks. After we hung up, I sat on the front porch swing. The same swing where Grandpa and I used to sit on summer evenings, planning our next project or just watching the neighborhood kids play. The weight of everything that had happened these past months pressed down on me, and for the first time since finding the lockbox, I let myself cry openly. For the loss of the family I thought I had. For the mother who had chosen addiction over honesty. For the grandfather who had tried to protect me, even after he was gone. A car pulled into the driveway, and I hastily wiped my eyes. It was Mom, alone for once, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. She sat down beside me on the swing, leaving a careful distance between us. Frank told me about your meeting today, she said after a long silence. I nodded but didn't speak. I didn't want you to find out like this. Her voice was barely audible. About the gambling. I was going to get it under control. I just needed a little more time, a little more money. How long has it been going on? I asked. On and off since before your father left. It got worse after Dad died. The grief, the emptiness of the house. The casino was somewhere I could go where no one knew me, as Walter's grieving daughter or Diamond's struggling mother. I could just be someone else for a while. And Frank? Where does he fit in all this? She sighed heavily. Frank was supposed to be my fresh start. He didn't know about the gambling at first. By the time he figured it out, we were already married, and he was trying to help me manage it. The house sale was his idea, a way to pay off everything and start clean. By selling a house that's half mine without even telling me. I convinced myself you'd be fine. That you were 30 and should have your own place anyway. That it was for your own good. She shook her head. I lied to myself as much as to you. And the locks? The text message? Her cheeks flushed with shame. Frank thought if we pushed hard enough you'd just give up and move on. I went along with it because I was desperate. The people I owe money to, they've started making threats. Not just against me, but against the family. We sat in silence for several minutes, the porch swing creaking gently beneath us. I'm not giving up my half of the house, Mom, I finally said. Grandpa wanted me to have it, and I've put 20 years of work into it, but I am offering to buy out your half at a fair price. Enough for you to pay off your debts and still have something left to start over. You'd do that? After everything? You're still my mother, and this is still our family home. I'd rather find a solution that helps everyone than win a battle that destroys us all. She didn't answer right away, just stared out at the yard where I'd played as a child, where she'd pushed me on a tire swing Grandpa had hung from the old oak tree. I need help, Diamond, she finally whispered. Not just with the money, with everything. I know, Mom, and if you're ready to get that help, I'll support you. But I need you to be honest with me from now on. No more secrets, no more manipulation. She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll talk to Frank and our lawyer tomorrow about your offer. As she stood to go inside, she paused, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Your grandfather would be proud of you. He always said you had the strongest moral compass of anyone he knew. I watched her go, feeling neither triumph nor defeat, but something more complex. A glimmer of hope that perhaps, out of all this pain and conflict, something healthier might eventually emerge. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There were still legal hurdles to clear, financial arrangements to make, and deep wounds to heal. But for the first time in months, I could see a way through that didn't require complete devastation of my family relationships. Grandpa's words from his letter echoed in my mind. Stand firm, grandson. What's right isn't always what's easy. I had stood firm. And now, perhaps, we could all find a way forward together. The final court ruling came down 3 weeks later, confirming what the documents had already established. I owned 50% of 824 Maple Street, with my mother owning the other 50%. The judge ordered that either party could buy out the other's interest at fair market value, or the property could be sold with proceeds split equally. By then, Mom had agreed to accept my buyout offer, $280,000 for her half of the house, based on the court appraiser's valuation of $560,000 total. Securing the financing wasn't easy. I had good credit but not much in savings after the legal bills. Eventually, I cobbled together a down payment using my entire emergency fund and a small loan from Brian, who insisted on helping despite my protests. The mortgage payments would be tight for a while, but manageable on my construction supervisor salary, especially once I returned to full-time work. Are you sure about this? Amanda asked during our final meeting at her office. Taking on this much debt is a significant commitment. I'm sure, I replied without hesitation. This isn't just about the money or even the house itself. It's about honoring Grandpa's wishes and preserving our family legacy. The day we signed the papers transferring full ownership to me was surreal. We met at the title company's office, a sterile room with fluorescent lighting and the faint smell of coffee. Mom signed her name with a shaking hand, officially relinquishing her claim to the house where she had grown up and raised her own children. It's still your home too, I told her quietly, as we stood in the parking lot afterward. You'll always have a place there if you need it. She shook her head, tears brimming. I need to make a clean break, to focus on getting better. The gambling addiction had finally been brought into the open, and with Frank's support, Mom had entered a treatment program. She'd confessed everything to a counselor, including the dangerous debts to loan sharks that had driven the desperate attempt to sell the house. Most of her buyout money went to paying off those debts, with a portion set aside for continuing treatment. It wasn't the financial cushion she might have hoped for, but it was a chance at a fresh start, unburdened by dangerous creditors. Frank had surprised me throughout the final negotiations. Once Mom's addiction was acknowledged, he became an unexpected ally, helping convince her to accept treatment and my buyout offer. "I'm sorry for how I handled things," he told me during a rare moment alone. "I was trying to protect her, but I went about it all wrong." "You didn't know the whole story either," I acknowledged. "None of us did." "What will you do with the house now?" he asked. "Fix it up. Finish some of the projects Grandpa and I started. Make it a home again." He nodded thoughtfully. "Jessica mentioned you're quite the craftsman. If you need an extra pair of hands sometime, I'm not completely useless with a hammer." It was a small olive branch, but one I was willing to accept. I'll keep that in mind. Mom and Frank moved into a small apartment across town, close to her treatment center. The distance was good for all of us, allowing space for new boundaries and healing to begin. My first night alone in the house was both liberating and lonely. I walked through each room, running my hands along the walls Grandpa and I had painted together, the crown molding we had installed in the living room, the hardwood floors we had refinished one summer when I was in high school. In the coming weeks, I threw myself into restoration projects, replacing the deck railings that had begun to rot, fixing the leaking upstairs bathroom faucet that Frank had complained about but never addressed, repainting the kitchen in the warm yellow Grandpa had always preferred. "You're nesting," Patrick observed when he came over to help install new kitchen cabinets. "Making it your own again." "Reclaiming it," I corrected, honoring what it's always been meant to be. One by one, I made new keys for the family. I gave the first one to Brian, who had stood by me through the worst of the conflict. "You're always welcome here," I told him as I pressed the key into his palm. "No matter what." The second key went to Amber. Our relationship was still fragile, rebuilt on tentative trust after the initial fracture. She had been the last to accept the truth about Mom's addiction, and the most reluctant to take sides in the family conflict. "Does this mean I can crash here when I fight with my roommate?" she asked, trying for lightness but with genuine uncertainty in her eyes. "Anytime," I promised. "This will always be your childhood home too." I held onto the third key longer, unsure whether to offer it or when the time would be right. Finally, 2 months after Mom moved out, I drove to her apartment and knocked on the door. She answered looking healthier than I had seen her in years. Treatment was working, she had told me during our weekly phone calls. One day at a time, she was finding her way back to herself. "I brought you something," I said, holding out the key. "When you're ready, when it feels right. No pressure." She took it with trembling fingers. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to come back there. Too many memories, too much shame." "The key isn't about the past," I explained. "It's about the future, about knowing there's always a door open to you." As Thanksgiving approached, I decided to host dinner at the house. It would be the first family gathering since everything had fallen apart, and I had no idea if anyone would come. Still, I sent invitations to everyone, even Frank and Travis, who had remained largely on the periphery of our family healing process. To my surprise, they all accepted. Even Mom, who had been avoiding the house, agreed to come for a few hours. I spent days preparing, cleaning every corner, making sure each guest room was ready in case anyone wanted to stay over. I followed Grandpa's traditional recipes, the ones he had used for every holiday dinner of my childhood. When the doorbell rang at 2 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day, I took a deep breath before answering. Mom stood on the porch, a pumpkin pie in her hands, Frank a supportive presence at her shoulder. "Welcome home," I said simply, stepping aside to let them enter. She paused in the foyer, taking in the familiar surroundings with new eyes. "You've been working on the place," she observed, noticing the fresh paint and repaired banister. "Little by little," I agreed. just like Grandpa taught me. Brian and his wife arrived next, then Amber, and finally Travis, who had initially declined but changed his mind at the last minute. We gathered in the dining room, around the table Grandpa had built by hand, when I was just a boy. The conversation was stilted at first, everyone carefully avoiding sensitive topics. But as the meal progressed, the tension gradually eased. Brian told stories about his new job. Amber shared pictures from her recent hiking trip. Even Travis, usually so sullen, participated in a lively debate about basketball teams. When it came time for dessert, Mom cleared her throat nervously. "Before we have pie, I'd like to say something." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each of us. "I've made a lot of mistakes, hurt people I love. I'm working on making amends as part of my recovery, and I want to start by apologizing to all of you, especially you, Diamond." She turned to face me directly. "What I did was wrong. Trying to sell your half of the house, locking you out, turning family against you. There's no excuse for that, addiction or not. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused." The room fell silent. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I forgive you, Mom, and I'm proud of you for getting help." It wasn't a magical moment that instantly healed all wounds. The road ahead would still have its rough patches and detours. But it was a beginning, a foundation on which to build something new, and perhaps, eventually, something stronger than what had been broken. After dinner, as everyone helped with cleanup, I slipped out to the front porch. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. I sat on Grandpa's porch swing, gently rocking back and forth, as I had done countless times as a child. The front door opened, and Mom stepped out, wrapping a sweater around her shoulders against the chill. "Mind if I join you?" she asked hesitantly. I patted the space beside me, and she sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. We swayed in silence for a while, listening to the muffled sounds of family conversation from inside, watching the last rays of afternoon sunlight paint the neighborhood in golden hues. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," she said finally. "Not just for saving the house, but for how you did it. For fighting for what's right, without losing sight of what matters most." "Family," I said simply. She nodded. "Family. Something I forgot the value of for a while." "We're all still learning," I told her. "Grandpa used to say that a house is just a structure, but a home is built every day by the people who live in it." "He was a wise man," she said with a sad smile. "I wish I had appreciated that more when he was alive." "Me too. But I think he knew, in his way." As twilight settled over the neighborhood, I realized I had finally found peace in the home I had fought so hard to keep. Not because I had won the legal battle, but because I had managed to preserve something more precious than property rights or material possessions. I had preserved the possibility of healing, of forgiveness, of family bonds that bend but don't break. I had honored my grandfather's legacy not just by keeping his house, but by embodying the values he had tried to instill in me. Standing up for what's right, taking care of what matters, and always leaving a door open for those finding their way home. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against your own family? It's one of the hardest things in life, fighting for what's rightfully yours while trying not to permanently damage relationships with the people who should be closest to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts or similar experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about family struggles and eventual healing. And if you know someone going through a difficult family situation right now, share this with them sometimes. Knowing we're not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope you find the strength to stand firm in your own life's challenges while keeping your heart open to reconciliation.